Hey everybody, welcome back to Sounds Like a Drum, Kane's independent media production. Today, we are continuing our long foray, ongoing, through snare side head options with orchestral snare side heads, and frankly, how they're not just for orchestra anymore. It seems like every drum head we see has a label on it that gives us some indication of what it's for, and it's very easy to get sucked into thinking that we can't kind of mix that up and go after different sounds just because when the thing was invented, there was an idea behind what it was intended to be used for. One of the classics that you'll see around here is us putting an EMAD, which is definitely a bass drum head, on a floor tom, which is definitely not a bass drum. Love it to death, sounds fantastic, and we are going right down the same path today with orchestral snare drum heads, specifically the snare side. Now, what are we talking about when we talk about orchestral snare drums and orchestral snare drum heads? What we're talking about is the use of a snare drum in an orchestral situation. And if you are in an orchestra and you're playing snare drum, you're competing with a lot of instruments, likely performing in a concert hall. Very big space, very boomy, very echoey, and it all comes back for this particular kind of sound to articulation and clarity, specifically in a really big room and possibly at a very great distance to the listener. What this means is that a lot of things that you'll see that are designed for orchestral snare drum are meant to emphasize, again, articulation, dryness, clarity across the dynamic range, and also having a particularly wide dynamic range, because if you look across material for orchestral snare drum, you'll see a lot of pianissimo or quieter, and also a lot of fortissimo and louder. So we need oftentimes one drum that can actually cover all of this inside of a single piece of music. We'd like to take a moment right now to thank our patrons on Patreon. They are supporting us and allowing us to continue to do this right now. Please, if you haven't, follow the link below, check it out, see if there's a tier that's right for you. It is literally facilitating us being able to continue to do this show. If you've been with us from the beginning or you're just joining us now, you may realize that there's just two of us here. We love this material. We love the audience and community that's grown around this, and we have big dreams for this channel. We have been working on it all the way through everything that's happened over the last few years, and we are really excited to grow and change and bring new things to you, to anyone that wants to learn how to expand their kit, expand their sound, and get more excited about making music on the drums. If you've ever had a specific request or idea or concept that you want to see an episode about, this is how we make more episodes. So contributing directly through the Patreon is the highest likelihood that things that you want to see in the future will end up happening on this channel. So again, please follow the link below, check it out. As little as $4 a month, you can support us, become a member, and also get access to everything else that we have on there as well. Now, what we're doing today is utilizing our old standby and favorite, our Supraphonic here, to get a sense of the difference between a normal snare side 300 clear head and the orchestral 300, which is the same thickness, but it's not the same material. It's also worth noting that this orchestral head has a bit of a texture to it, but this is not applied at the factory. This is just fundamental to the material, and when you see it, it might give you the impression that it's coated or that it's had some kind of thing done to the surface. It's not the case. It's just a different material than the normal snare side 300. Now, it goes without saying that this is one of our episodes and musical scenarios where this is a subtle difference. Headphones are a good idea. Listening very critically, also a good idea. We are splitting snares here. But the bottom line is that there is a difference, and it is influencing the way that I both play the drum and just the way the drum feels to me when I'm playing it. Additionally, today we've modified our miking setup just a little bit. We've added an AKG 460B underneath the snare drum to capture the wires. We don't normally have a snare side mic when we record here because it's really about getting into the subtleties and being able to balance the batter sound with the snare side sound. But since we're dealing with subtleties today, it seemed like the right thing to do. Primarily, we are experiencing more articulation across the dynamic range. We are also experiencing some clarity and dryness that, to my ear right here, is giving me a sense that some of the mid-range of the drum has been scooped out a little bit, and there's a warmth in the low end and a clarity in the high end, almost like a smiley face EQ or something like that has been added to the drum. But again, the only thing that we changed is the snare side head. It is the exact same tension, the wires are the same, the batter has not been tuned differently. So anything you're hearing from this drum right now is specific to that head being changed out. Obviously, there's nothing wrong with using an orchestral snare drum head in a drum set context, but what is interesting about this from our perspective is that if we hadn't said that we had done that, it's unlikely that a listener, even listening very critically, would have known necessarily what we changed or would have been able to pick out that we had decided to change the bottom head to one designed for an orchestra snare drum. The larger and I think more important overarching idea here is that by changing batter heads we get different sounds, by changing wires we get different sounds, but the snare side head gets ignored. We get the one that we use, we get used to it, we run with that. This is a small change and an expensive change that will also last for a very long time since we're not hitting it all day long, that is actually changing the entire character of the drum through the entire tuning range and also making the wires that we've chosen interact with the drum differently as well. And while we're talking about the wires today are Pure Sound Custom Pros, and we are using the strap on one end and strings on the other because it's an old Supra and we can't use straps on both sides. Now at this juncture, have we transformed this drum into an orchestral snare drum by changing this head? No, not at all. We have changed the sound of the drum, obviously, and that's fun, but an orchestral snare drum has a lot more going on than just different heads put on it. The main difference is that you will have a completely different setup for the wires or other things, cables that might be underneath there. And additionally, a lot of modern snare drums that are used for orchestra have a mixture that you can use between different sorts of cable, different kinds of snappy snares, kind of a wide variety. And all of this is in furtherance of getting a lot of sounds out of a single drum while living in the space of being able to use it inside of a symphony, inside of a symphony hall, and having it speak properly through all of those instruments. I have also seen wires for snare drums that are meant to emulate the sound of an orchestral drum while being able to be fitted onto a standard drum like this. That is something that I want to actually explore in the future and takes us out of the realm of normal snappy snares like we're used to, Pure Sounds and the like, and into a whole other world of sounds that, again, are not a huge investment and completely transform the behavior of the drum, similarly to swapping out for a different style of snare side head. Now, what would influence me or you to choose this head over the standard? In the end, it's really just about a sound that makes us happy, like a lot of the things that we talk about here. And it could also be, in a kind of scenario where you have a drum that is unruly or a drum that is hard to kind of control, because there is a bit more control just by virtue of changing this head and leaving everything else exactly the same. I have to circle back to that for years and years and years, I was just changing out batter heads on snare drums to try to get different sounds. I never thought about the idea that there was so much happening underneath that I was ignoring completely. Never mind ignoring the wires too. I mean, we've all been there when we were starting out, but there's a lot of wiggle room here where something as simple as wanting your drum to sound a little bit older or sounding a little bit drier, or just wanting to explore the tuning range and the tone of a drum you're familiar with by changing one aspect of it. For me, this orchestral head really shined in situations where I wanted to really hear ghost notes, wanted them to be a little bit darker, a little bit drier, a little bit clearer, and also any musical scenario where I would want the drum to just sound a little older. There is a lot of dryness and clarity and punchiness in older drums, both because of how they were constructed and also because of the recording styles of those times where they generated the sounds that we love on records. And this is a great place to kind of start to explore how to make those recorded sounds in real life for your live applications. Now, if you're listening to this and realizing that you want to check it out, these are readily available online. They are minimally more expensive than a standard Snareside 300. It's an investment, but it's not really any different monetarily than getting the standard. One thing you do need to be careful of, though, is that depending on what brand of orchestral head you're looking at, the collars may be different than what is normal for a drum set snare drum. So make sure if you're going down this route that the collar and overall construction is matched to the sort of drum you're going to put it on. Now, I don't have the strongest orchestral background. I'm primarily a drum set player, but coming up, I still spent some time with these things, and I wanted to take a moment to really take this drum through the dynamic range with both the Snareside 300 and the Orchestral Snareside 300 with a little bit of Tony Cerrone. To sum up, this really falls in line with some other modifications we've done in the past, switching out types of hoops, switching out the width of the snare wires, experimenting with 10 mil versus 12 mil. If you're the sort of person that loves subtleties, experimenting with the ranges of those subtleties, this is definitely the kind of thing for you. And unlike getting new hoops or a drum with a different lug count, this is a very small price to pay, like money price to pay, to get a whole new set of sounds out of a drum that you already have and experiment with how it interacts with everything else on that drum. And if you've made it this far in the video and you don't hear any difference between these two heads, any of these grooves, any of these examples, that's okay too. The world has plenty of room for all of us, those of us that obsess about things like this, and those of us that just want to play. It's all good. It's all fun. And at the end of the day, it's just about the inspiration. Thank you so much for coming along with us on this, our latest Snareside adventure. I am really excited about this. I'm going to get me one of these when I get home because I definitely have a drum that I think is going to benefit from it. If you enjoyed this, do please like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell so you hear about our new videos, and most of all, again, please follow the link to the Patreon below if you haven't already. We have a lot of exclusive content over there, Cymbals series, a lot of things coming up that we're super excited about. It is facilitating us being able to continue to do this, so if you want to support us, that is the most direct way that you possibly can. Lastly, if you like to integrate orchestral things into your drum set, I'm getting real excited about this. I don't even care if it's a snare head, snare drum, it could be anything. If you put orchestral stuff on your kit, I want to know about it.